Friends, welcome to this program on copyright in distance education and a new area of interest, open education resources. This is a program from Stride, and this is a new area that we are looking at. Of course, we do not have mention of these in any of our courses, but still these new emerging areas would be of interest to you, I think. And in this program, we'll look at that, how important copyright is. And what are the different dimensions of copyright? Of course, we'll not look at plagiarism as an issue, which we could look at later in any one of the programs later. But more importantly, we'll focus on copyright as an issue, as also discuss open education resources, the kinds of resources that have come up, how open are open education resources, and to what extent we can use them, what varieties of resource centers are available to us, and how we can use them, and some of these issues concerning openness in educational resources today. We have divided the program into two parts. The first part would look at the copyright issues in distance education, and the second part we would look at open education resources, and combined together they will make a theme on copyright and open education resources. If you look at copyright as an issue, what is, after all, copyright? Who holds the copyright, and what matters really are eligible for copyright? If you look at the PowerPoint that I'm presenting right now, that three important bullets that I have presented here. The right to control the use of the work of the creator. Those who are the person who creates an original thing holds the copyright unless one ascribes that right to others. But even if one ascribes that right to others, one still holds the economic and moral right, and more importantly, the moral right. Therefore, the owner can give, sell, license the right to be used by others, so one can hand over, can sell it, and license for certain period, for certain agreements, under certain agreements, to a third party to use that. And therefore, it is illegal for others to use without the person's consent. If you look at under what conditions copyright can be used, the first, that it must be an original work. Second, it must be fixed work, which could be print, sound, photograph, or a film. Third, the person must belong to a country and must have a citizenship. If a person doesn't have a citizenship, will certainly forfeit the copyright of what one is creating, and therefore that it is for a fixed term, for music, for print, for artwork. There are different years of copyright terms available. After the expiry of that date, anybody can copy that freely. That comes in the public domain. So it is a fixed term, and after which it comes down to the public domain to be used by anybody who would like to use that. What are the general uses of copyright? The first is license. It can be a short-term license or a long-term license retaining the copyright, and therefore there has to be a licensing agreement, and the agreement has to be legally tenable. It has to be legally executed, and it has to be legally tenable. Second, that one can assign that copyright to others, so therefore one can hand over the copyright to a new copyright owner. But I must underline here that in this particular case, one still retains the moral right as the creator of the work. Three, that one can reserve the right. Therefore one can withhold the right to assign to anybody or not to assign to anybody. And finally, that the moral right still, as I said earlier, still remains with the creator. Now let us use these copyright issues and principles and concepts in distance education. In distance education, I would see that we use a lot of materials in print, audio, video, graphics, animation, websites, multimedia, teleconferencing, of course, which is live, synchronous, and sometimes synchronous charts, asynchronous discussion forums, and sometimes this live two-way video conferencing that is going on could also be recorded to be used for multiple use later on. Who holds the copyright? These are important questions that we would like to address in this program now henceforth in distance education. If you look at the transparency that we have presented here, in distance education we have to assign for print and online programs separately, and therefore the issue is how to distinguish between, for instance, ghostwriters and editors. If you are using course writers, you are paying them, you are providing credit to them. They are the creators of that. There are editors. There are many others, copy editors, language editors, format editors, instructional design editors, and a host of people who have been involved, even in print, to create that program, or a course unit, or a module. And therefore, the copyright is my home. Essentially, we at National Open University, we have assigned the copyright to the institution that is IGNOU. And therefore, it is important that we provide essential documents to the creators, that they should sign an agreement that the copyright will be ultimately owned by the institution. But still, they hold the moral right. At any point of time, they can refer to the institution and acknowledge with a request that they can use those materials anywhere they would feel like, but not for profit, because they have been paid for once. Second, that the question of broadcasting, for instance, now teleconferencing going on, or a broadcast or video recorded material. So if a recorded material is repeatedly broadcast, what happens to copyright? Who owns the copyright? Say, for instance, live teleconferencing, who owns the copyright? And three, that if, for instance, students' works that are created online, or the assignments that they write physically in print form and supply to us, and we retain the assignments and copies and return to the students with grades and comments, and some of these good assignments and project reports that we can use as cases for our additional years of offer of those programs without revision. And once we revise the whole thing. There can be a major revision. But before a major revision takes place, we can use those materials as assignments. We can use a student assignment again as an assignment, as a case for the next year's program, offer of the program. Who owns the copyright? This is an important question, that at the time of assessment and examination, who owns the copyright? Now let us look at the electronic use of the copyright issues in distance education. When there is a real-time transmission from multi-locations, as it is happening right now in teleconferencing. But what happens when we use repeatedly through recorded programs? If you are doing once teleconferencing to multi-locations, if we have the copyright, we can say this is copyrighted and we have the right to broadcast to different locations. But if we use that as repeatedly as possible, what happens to copyright? Do we again pay to the person who is presenting that? Who holds the copyright? Later on, can the person use that recorded material anywhere one feels like the print, and with due acknowledgement to the institution, not for profit? Second, for instance, that when there is a transmission delivery through protected intranet, for instance. In case of internet, it is World Wide Web. But in case of intranet, say for instance through a local area networking, if you are using materials which is very much protected through password, protected to certain boundaries, like for instance a university campus, if the students are studying face-to-face, and there can be use of intranet-based materials, electronic resources within the classroom too. So who owns the copyright? So therefore, if there is a satellite network, there is a local area network, who holds the copyright? But say for instance if you are offering programs through the website, web-based programs through internet, who holds the copyright? These are all issues that need to be addressed in copyright in distance education. Now let us look at the kinds of contracts that we can negotiate insofar as copyright is concerned. We need to have provisions in place which are legally tenable to outsource materials or writing to external authors, which will be edited by the editors, instructional designers, graphic artists, whose materials are inserted into the printed materials, multimedia programmers, who later on produce audio, video, and multimedia programs based on the printed materials that are already produced, and web designers, who create websites and transform those materials into websites. Who owns the copyright? And how to settle this issue across the board, because there are a host of people, as we call coach team, is involved in this. The second issue involved is that if we are developing national repositories, as we are developing, say for instance eGyanKosh, who holds the copyright? This is a major issue, that the people who have already created materials, people who would be creating materials which are digitized and which are made available on the website, and whose copyright is this? Of course the institution would say that this is copyrighted by the institution. We need to very seriously look into this issue to find out what exact provisions exist under copyright law to protect the copyright, and therefore to assign copyright or share copyright with somebody else, whosoever is involved in doing that or in creating that. A major issue comes up. Look at the third point. When we are talking about adaptation of materials, translation of the materials, and nowadays we are talking about transcreation of materials, that keeping the materials as base, we develop new materials in a different language. For instance, to translate from English to Hindi, we could transcreate from English to Hindi based on the materials in English. And who owns the copyright insofar as translation is concerned? Because translation is by a party or a group or an individual who translates, but the material has already been created by somebody else. Now, therefore, let us look at the consortia approach. For instance, the Distance Education Council in our case, which collects materials, stores materials in a basket, and therefore would be able to retrieve and redistribute materials under certain conditions, under certain agreements. Say, for instance, direct sale for use for a specific period with original right retained by the Apex University, in this case IGNOU, for instance. Or, for instance, there are materials available by other state open universities or dual mode universities which others can use, which the consortium can facilitate. Second, assigning the right to adapt, change, use in whatever way. So the rights have to be assigned, that one can change it, redo, insert cases, insert activities, change, translate, transform in whatever way and therefore in that case who owns the copyright? And should we necessarily pay royalty to the course writers and others who are creating materials for the first time? This is an issue which needs to be addressed. One has to look into many other operational aspects of internationally universities which are offering distance education programs, and therefore re-examine that the possibility that should we necessarily share our revenues with those who have created materials for us. The third point is that permission without any charge. So the council can simply facilitate and simply say that we can get materials and we can store and we can redistribute, and no profit, no loss, and nobody will be charging any money for that. And finally, licensing to use for a specific period with or without changes. These copyright issues need to be resolved in distance education more particularly. What therefore is the institutional responsibility? The first responsibility by the institution is that all permissions for all materials to be used by students for selling or licensing need to be obtained. If we do not have a policy, if we do not have a procedure to do this, we are most probably lacking somewhere, because all these people who would be creating that and all those people who would be using that and reusing that, because once digitized they will be reusable, just like reusable learning objects. These print materials, audio materials, video materials can be digitized and reused, and therefore all kinds of permissions need to be in place, and therefore a procedure has to be in place. Number two, that say for instance if you are using consultants, the consultants, we need to have permission or contract with the consultants that the creation belongs to the institution and that all developed material is original. And this is very important, that all that we are getting in terms of print, audio and video, they are original or they are copyrighted. They are of course original by somebody else, and we take the copyright of that original material and use in our case. And we take a free copyright, we pay for that, we take a licensing agreement, and whatever we adopt that, whatever we do, we must have copyright clearance for that. Number three, that if there is a need for a third-party permission, say for instance we use tables, graphs, maps, excerpts, student assignment extracts, internet content, all these are copyrighted, and therefore we need to necessarily obtain copyright clearance for use of these materials. And therefore, say for instance, finally, if we are converting all these materials into a platform called Interactive Multimedia CD-ROM, varieties of people for print, varieties of people team for audio, for video, they are responsible for creating these materials. And when we collate all these through an instructional design format into a multimedia CD-ROM, who holds the copyright? That is an important question. This needs to be addressed, and therefore we need to have a policy on this issue. Let us now talk about the website. Say for instance web pages, which are literary works, graphics, which are artistic works, say for instance sound files, which are musical works, online collaborative creations, say for instance a virtual conference or a virtual forum or virtual discussion, for instance. Hyperlinks for students, we provide through in our online learning a lot of hyperlinks, sometimes without copyright clearance from those hyperlinks we provide. Who owns the copyright, and therefore a clearance will be needed. Web pictures, for instance, digital licensing, because we cannot copy the web pictures. They are not free, by the way. And database copyright. We refer to a lot of databases. We use a lot of databases. We provide hyperlink to a lot of databases. And therefore, who owns the copyright? Friends, what through this presentation I'm trying to say that we need to have a copyright policy. We need to have a copyright unit. We need to have a copyright officer. So insofar as copyright is concerned. Based on what we have discussed, let us now proceed to the second aspect of the presentation, that open education resource. Now through this transparency, what you see is a distinction between free resource and open resource, or open source and free source. Free software are available with source code. We can use, modify, redistribute those, and we cannot really do that for proprietary software. These are protected. So for instance, the third point in the proprietary software, for instance, that in proprietary software we can use for a fee, and the source code is closely guarded. We cannot use that, and even if we use for free, we can license that. We cannot change that, which has been guarded, which has been guaranteed, which has been protected. But in case of open source software, the focus is actually on the software development and use of it, rather than getting into the source code. Say for instance, we'll come back to this a little later. Say for instance, Wikipedia or WikiEducator for that, and the use of Wiki, which is an online encyclopedia, which is a collaborative development of content available internationally, free to people who would like to be engaged with it. And finally, open educational resources. Wikipedia defines this, that internet-empowered worldwide community effort to create an education commons. We'll come to this education commons later, which is a legally protected online service to protect copyright for those who create, for those who reuse, for those who use, for those who change, and so on and so forth. These are protected by law. And we'll come back to this education commons in terms of Creative Commons or Education Commons a little later. Let us now look at the historical development of all these terminologies that we are using today. The learning object, as we are telling, that once you create a graph, once there is a piece of or a fraction of an audio program or a video program, anything that we could capture in still form or in moving form, in animated form, we would call that as a learning object, which can be reused. And these days we're talking about reusable learning objects. So Viney Hodgins created this idea in 1994, and we are still using in the form of reusable learning objects. In 1998, the concept of open content came up, with David Wiley creating that concept, and which are still we are still using that. Leroy Lessing and colleagues in 2001 created what is called Creative Commons, and which is available online if you create something and which you declare under Creative Commons, which is protected internationally legally by law, and therefore nobody can tamper, and one has to follow, one has to use that within the copyright principles, whatever is available there. And in 2001 was a historic year when MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, declared creative courseware. Almost 2,000 courses were made available, and later on many more courses were added to that. And we'll talk about that. We'll look at their site a little later. And in 2002, which is again historical, based on what MIT did, UNESCO declared what is called a concept as well as a functionality in terms of use of educational and training resources, more particularly for teacher training, open educational resources. Now let us look at the open educational resources of UNESCO. The open education resource that UNESCO created, if you go to www.unesco.org, if you have web access, if you have internet access, you will get into their site, and a lot of resources that you find are open educational resources. And there are resources available on what is called open education resources. So the three kinds of things that are available in an open education resource are mentioned in the transparency, and the first one is the learning content. So you will find courses, journals, learning objects which are available, which you can reuse, and sometimes one has to check whether there are copyright principles or conditions that apply to that, and therefore one has to follow the conditions, be abided by those conditions to use those learning content. So what we know is about learning content. What generally we do not know that in open education resource the tools are available. The tools are available to support content creation, content management, content search, and creation and sustenance of and management of online learning community. All these tools are open education resources. They are available, and one can use them to create and to reuse all these that are listed here. And there are also implementation resources, say for instance intellectual property licenses. Once you create that, automatically as an online program, that has to be protected, and that has to be protected by, say for instance, like Education Commons and Creative Commons. Open education resource followed by creation of free open source software, say for instance MIT OpenCourseware, and followed by FLOSS or free or library open source software, say for instance Wikipedia. These are three important developments: UNESCO's open education resource, MIT OpenCourseware, which is under FOSS, and Wikipedia, which we'll talk about, is under free library open source software, FLOSS. There are two kinds of most importantly usable. There are many others. We generally use Wikipedia. We also use European Commission FLOSS.com, not FLOSS.com, FLOSS.com actually. So these are very largely used FLOSS web resources or web platforms as open resources, and sometimes one has to look at the copyright protection within that. Let us look at some of the examples of open courseware available today to us. The first, as we said, that the MIT OpenCourseware, as you see on the screen, this is the website of the MIT OpenCourseware. As I said, that almost 2,000 courses from different disciplines of engineering, technology, medicine, social sciences, language, and so on and so forth were made available, and more and more courses are being added to these. And anybody can download, go through, use, reuse under certain protective conditions that MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, USA, has already mentioned. Look at the open education resource. This is not the open education resource website of UNESCO. This is open training platform. This is a training platform that UNESCO has created. You can use this, you can recreate, you can use this platform to recreate, you can use this platform to provide training, you can use this platform to recreate, redesign your training program in the way you would like it. 3, say for instance, JHSPH OpenCourseware. This is Johns Hopkins University website where the OpenCourseware are available under certain conditions, of course, and one can use that as much as possible. And Johns Hopkins University, just like MIT, makes available some of the courseware free, and one can go through and get in touch and make reusable those learning resources which are available. This is about open sharing, global benefits. This is OpenCourseware Consortium. This is a consortium which has been created for making available open education resources. One can go through and find out. This is OpenCourseware Consortium, which has been created for especially support received from donor agencies internationally. Now let us look at CORE, for instance, CORE Open Resources for Education. This is also open resources available. One can go to the website and access those resources that are available. Now let us look at FETP Courseware. This is created by Courseware Initiative OCW. The Fulbright School has begun to publish its teaching and research materials online, FETP OpenCourseware. This is the website of that, and this was inspired by the MIT's OpenCourseware initiative or OCW, and this is the Fulbright School that has created these open resources. This is created by the Japan Open Courseware Consortium, and if you go to the website, you get into, this is of course in English and this is available in Japanese. You can get hold of a lot of materials that are available. This is OPS. This is created by I think the Taiwan. This is by the Taiwan Open Source Consortium, and this is of course available in Chinese language, in Mandarin, but still I'm not sure if there is an English version, but one can still access these, and there is an English version available, so one can access this. But what is widely used is the Chinese version of this website. This is the website that you see, the home page. This is designed very differently, and all these materials that are available, the country of origin are also mentioned, the courseware are also listed, and one can also get into other kinds of resources that are not necessarily belonging to one discipline. So therefore, this is an open courseware available, and one has to use under certain conditions. This is National Repository for Online Courses website, the home page, and which is available, and a lot of materials that say U.S. history, American government, and all these, high school and advanced placement, and all these kinds of things. Besides the materials that are available, the other services are also available. This is the Spanish version of the MIT Open Courseware, and MIT Courseware is being translated into the entire website, and courses are being translated into different languages, and these are available. This is the Spanish version of the MIT Courseware. Friends, we have looked at some of these websites, and you can get into more of these websites. What we see on the transparency is the software aspect, the teaching aspect, and the research aspect of the open source software or the open education resources. So far, learning management system is concerned, there are two kinds, proprietary and open source. The proprietary are of course WebCT and Blackboard. As you know, the WebCT and Blackboard have merged together into one platform, into one company. Even if the platforms are used separately, they belong to one company. The Blackboard and WebCT merger was very historical, and almost they have the monopoly insofar as proprietary learning management and content management system is concerned. The open source, the largely used are Moodle and Sakai, and these days internationally more and more institutions and people and individuals coming forward, and industries are coming forward to use Moodle, which is an open source, which needs to be used by people, which needs to be modified, which needs to be customized by institutions as per their own needs, and therefore the open source of course have their own limitations, and therefore one needs periphery software, again open source software, which can be connected or adapted to the Moodle or the Sakai platform. So for teaching is concerned, we have already seen the MIT courseware, which are available free. The other one, if you look at the transparency, the other one is Connections, for instance. This is a collaborative online project. If you type in Google Connections, CONNEXIONS, you get into the website and you access, and you can also collaboratively join in an online project. Those who are dealing with higher education will be highly benefited by the Merlot website, the multimedia educational resource for learning and online teaching Merlot, and www.merlot.org. One can get into their site and a lot of materials that are available for higher education. And Merlot has an international journal and referee journal, which is doing very well. Insofar research is concerned, two sites are very important, two platforms, arxib.org, this is the science areas, and Public Library of Science, PLOS materials or the websites are available. And finally, we look at the licensing. So far licensing is concerned, we have licensing agreements, and so far print is concerned. So far multimedia and web resources are concerned, we have three important licensing agencies available internationally, which are online. The largest used licensing agency is Creative Commons, that this is a commonly jointly created consortium which can ratify the copyright of those who create web resources, and once one declares under Creative Commons, those who join that could very well use that. And that is very important, that once it is declared under Creative Commons, one can use and reuse under certain conditions which the Creative Commons has declared. We're not getting into those conditions more particularly because of shortage of time, but if you get into www.creativecommons.org, you get to know that all those conditions that are available there. The second one is Education Commons, educationcommons.org, and you can get into again a consortium of web resources. And the third one is www.gnu.org, GNU Free Documentation License. These three licensing services are available online, and one can get into those websites to know more about them. To conclude that what we have discussed in this program is two things. One is about copyright, which is very important, and especially copyright in distance education, with one caution that we have to create materials, use materials, reuse materials with full consciousness of copyright involved within that. Whether it is use of print, graphics, animation, photographs, tables, charts, audio, video, and web resources available on the internet, they are copyrighted, and we have to be very careful in using them. And therefore, once we violate that, we are not only violating, we are also getting into what is called plagiarism. And therefore, let us be very careful insofar as copyright is concerned. We have discussed some of the basic considerations that we need to make, including establishment of copyright units and copyright procedures and copyright people involved in copyright officer, for instance, in institutions. Vis-a-vis copyright, we have tried to look at the open education resources, the free resources that are available, the proprietary resources that are available, and we have looked at some of the websites of the open education resources, some of the best institutions that are offering some of the finest programs under open education resources, and we have also talked about the UNESCO site, Open Education Resource. We, of course, didn't have time to look at Wikipedia, which is an online encyclopedia that people can join together collaboratively to create content. Once you create content, you tamper with that, you get into that, recreate, you get into their history, and anybody involved in that will come to know that who has done what at what point of time. Everything is recorded online. In case of online, everything is recorded second by second, fraction by fraction. Wiki Educator has been developed by the Commonwealth of Learning, and again a collaborative tool to create content, to offer content, to provide training, to join together in discussion groups, and so on and so forth, and to put content into that website. We have not talked about some other possibilities like blogging, weblogging, and so on and so forth, which are available with the development of Web 2.0, and maybe we'll look at all these aspects in another program. Thank you. Thank you very much.